Okay, so I'm gonna start this off by getting one thing straight. I'm not a YouTuber. I wouldn't even really call myself a creator. I'm more of a creative. I'm a music producer. I'm a songwriter. I help other people make their music. I make my music. But then why am I here today? The name's Chrimz. I'm here today because I have some things that I've been wanting to talk about that have been aching at my soul. They've been tugging me in this direction for a really long time now. So here I am. I'm also a friend to many. Not a friend to all, but definitely a friend to many. I talk to these friends, just like friends would, and they say things like, I don't know why I've been feeling this way lately, or stuff like, I don't know who I am, or like, I feel like I finally found my purpose. And those are all regular things people ask, at least nowadays, because nowadays, as a species, we're kind of at a point where we're just kind of lost. We got no purpose. All we're being told is what we're being spoon-fed on TikTok or by these corrupt politicians whose only job is to make money off of you. Hold on one sec, I'm getting a little heated. And that's another thing. You're being told what to do, and yes, I smoke weed, but it's medical, so you can't say nothing about it. Plus, if you wanted to say something about it, maybe you need to try a little bit, huh? You ever think about that? Anyways, so nowadays, we're at a point where we just can't stand up and do what we want for ourselves. And so we're constantly in this feeling that we're trapped in ourselves. We have things inside we want to exercise, but there's so many, things telling us that that's not okay. We need outlets, and so we take to places like TikToks or Instagram to express our opinion. Speaking's good because there's a 3-step process I really believe in. It starts with thoughts turn into speaking, and then speaking turns into action. But if you're constantly stuck in this phase where you're just speaking about everything and you're not actually going out and doing it, you're never gonna reach that feeling that we all have of actually wanting to complete something. With that being said, it's like, well, how can I complete something if I have too many things going on? I have work every day, I have this every day, and that's exactly the problem. And that's exactly what I'm here to talk about today. Okay, so I come from a place where I had to think about things on my own. There was a lot of addiction in the family, mental illness, all of that. I really had a really rough perspective on the world, and I didn't know who I was. I was talking down on everything I could think to talk down on because I was just unhappy. The thing about being unhappy is, humans can't last long before, they feel like they need to take some sort of action. At least that's how I was. So I started trying to do things for myself. I started going to therapy. It started opening me up. I've heard people who want to talk down on therapy and say it just makes you more crazy. Freaking Uber boyos of the world or whatever. I've seen many right things talking about how, like, back in the day when we didn't have as much free will as people, we were able to dedicate our lives to these big, long, beautiful projects. We weren't constantly stuck thinking in the now. We had a different purpose. We were serving a higher power. There was, something greater about what we were doing, and because of it, we were able to give our all. Now, what are we giving our all to as a society? We're giving our all to Snapchat, TikTok, and Instagram, and we'll make a whole separate video on him. But for the time being, I was at a point where I needed somebody to talk to. I was alone, and I got lucky with a good therapist. I've talked to people in the past that were bad. This one wasn't like that, because when I went to therapy, I took my own initiative. I walked in there and I got done what I wanted to get done. I didn't sit there and wait for the other person to fix me. Therapy and therapists, they're purely a vessel for you to be able to latch onto and rebuild your soul. But you have to do the rebuilding. That is 100% you. You clicked on this video today because you're trying to find your true self, or you're just trying to see what insane facts I'm trying to spit here. We need rebuilding. We need a purpose. To answer my question from earlier, that's why I'm here. I'm here because if I took to one of those brainless sites like TikTok, or Instagram, I'd get lost in the flood of motivational gurus who are just trying to sell you some stuff so that they can make their money and they can get ahead, because they see the transition that's happening in this world. It's not about selling stuff. It's not about getting ahead. It's about you looking within yourself and you taking the personal initiative. So now you're at a point where you need to make a change, where you know it's only you that's going to talk yourself off of that ledge. And that's exactly where I was on my journey. I was at a point where I was going to therapy, and then it got to the point where I was getting really bad because I was opening that can of worms. I like to think of therapy as, you know, those really big cans of beans, and when you flip them upside down and they come out, you know, they're still kind of like weird and like solid. It kind of felt like you're sitting there with a spoon trying to digest this can of beans, you know. And that's a lot of what these little motivational, you know, psychic gurus forget about. They forget about the concept of trauma. Trauma could feel like a very real thing because as humans, we're at a point where we're just stuck in the overthinking nonsense because we don't have a higher power to dedicate ourselves to, but we still have a soul that has something that it needs to cry out. On my journey, I was digesting this whole can of beans. It got to a point where I felt like I couldn't handle eating anything, you know, that consistent of such like a, you know, of such like a dense texture. You know, you're gonna crack. I broke. I was put on medications and they told me that I was bipolar. When you receive a diagnosis like that, it feels like everything you thought you knew, like the whole rug was just pulled under you. And it makes sense. At the same time, you can't sit there and be stuck in that cycle of labeling yourself and telling yourself that you're gonna be, you know, set back, that you're gonna be set far behind, that it's not a way you should want to be living. And that's where the soul comes into play. At that point, I still hadn't really accomplished much. I've understood, but I've talked about it, but I haven't turned that to action. And that's probably the most important step. So now we're at the final step, going back to my original journey when I was taking medication, but I wasn't really taking much action. If anything, what the medication did is it dulled me around the edges. Yes, it made it to where I wasn't so overwhelmed. I felt like what it did is, you know, I feel like humans, you know, we're capable of unlocking this much potential, and what the medication did is it just narrows it down. Just realistically speaking, from somebody, well, I wasn't on no Prozac, I was on antipsychotics, and those things effed me up, man, more than weed did, you know. And I had to stop smoking for a long time for them. They told me in order to receive a proper diagnosis, I wasn't smoking the whole time I was on medication. It eventually got to a point where I was like, this isn't working. They kept upping the dosage, adding more medications. There was something that was missing. There was more to it. Lo and behold, that ended up being the action. First action I took was get off the medication. That was something I needed to do for myself. I was a musician before. I wasn't able to create. I wasn't able to make a good song in months. There's a whole gap in my discography. You can see it. I wasn't improving either. I wasn't really making any playable materials. The first action was I got off the medication. You know, I stopped cold turkey one day. They tried telling me, oh, that could end up messing you up more, but I stopped. And then I ended up, you know, researching philosophies and different stuff like that, trying to find a separate outlet. I was instead looking to understand. Then I came across a guy by the name of Carl Jung. That basically changed everything for me. I was just researching religiously, reading. I was taking what I felt was real action at the time, but then I ended up doubling down because, you know, making music, that was action that I was taking also. And that music, I started tying all the stuff I was learning with Jung into the themes in my music, and I started blending it together and released it to people, and they didn't see the hitting meanings, but it was enough for me. It was satisfying, and all of a sudden I was pulling myself out of this rut, and it was because I was able to turn my attention away from all of these other things in my life, like the social media, all the things that really didn't matter. I only move with purpose now. I only move with meaning. But really, I owe it all to one specific psychology that Jung introduced, and, you know, it was the idea of the psyche, and I became obsessed with the idea of the psyche, and I wanted to integrate all my different parts. For most of you who don't know who Jung is, he's the guy who tokened many modern terms like ego, introvert and extrovert. That started with him too. And you know, he also came up with the idea of the psyche, the fact that we have different parts of ourselves. Actually, this is a thing I did for one of my music, you know, that was actually based off of the model of the psyche. That was to promote that EP that I was saying had to do with Jung. I started understanding the different parts of the psyche and how to integrate it, and I made a song for each part, and I was able to fuse things with myself. I'd be able to understand myself on a deeper level and be able to heal myself. I was already out of therapy at this point. I was already gone. Therapy was like that initial digesting, and I got off the medication and I ended therapy around the same time too, and I just decided to take care of it on my own because I realized this was a problem that I was only ever going to defeat when I understood myself. That's why I'm here, because I think that there's not enough education around this. They're trying to numb you. You don't want to be numbed because you want to be able to have free will. You want to be able to speak for yourself. You want to be able to know that the thoughts you're saying are genuinely coming from you. This goes so much deeper than this, but this is an introduction. This is the start of something, and you know, I hope you stick around. I hope you found some of it helpful. If you did find it helpful, let me know in any way you can, and I appreciate it. Have a great day, guys, and good luck with that.